All right, well, thank you all for being here today. We are providing a transportation update and want to give some indication as to our progress since the beginning of the school year. This is our third press conference that we've had one each week since the school year began. And I want to make sure that folks understand we've also provided communication with our families, our students, and the media as requested. I want to really share a heartfelt apology to our parents who are impacted and our students who are impacted by our transportation woes. As I've said many times from the beginning of this situation, I wanted to focus first on making the improvements and the progress that I know our kids and community do deserve. And at this point, and then worry more about what happens next, how did it happen, who's held responsible, etc. We know that the rollout of the system was absolutely unacceptable. We've shared that publicly since the beginning. I want to stress that the safety and security of our students is and always will be a priority. I also appreciate the bus drivers and the way that they've stepped up to resolve the issues and ensure safety of our students. They've come back, they've shared their thoughts and ideas, we've made changes along the way. I also appreciate the passion and interest that our community voices have shared, including Representative Schlossberg, who is a good friend of public education and to safety. We spoke yesterday, we spoke again today, and we share concerns on the same issue. I also want to thank the countless staff members who've worked tirelessly through the last 3 weeks, nights and weekends, since this issue was brought to our attention on August 17th. This team has single-handedly handwritten 2,400 routes with almost 19,000 stops each day, covering 13 million miles in a given year, 2,400 square mile county. That's a very complicated task that they've been asked to do. We still have some tweaks that need to occur, but they have really stepped up and helped us get to that space. From the day I was made aware of this situation, I've committed the resources here to get that resolved. On the first day of school, August 17, we delivered approximately 60% of our students on time. Today, we're delivering approximately 85% of our students on time, which is about the same percentage as our district reached at the end of last year. That number is still unacceptable, and we're committed to improving that each and every day. In my last school district, the first month of August, the district served more kids on driving, and we were delivering kids at 98%. So 85% is not acceptable. I know we can, we will, and we must do better. From the day I've made it clear that this is a priority, we'll be resolving the issues and then holding people accountable. Well, it's that time. What I've done at the beginning of this week, at the start of this week, I authorized the hiring of a third-party firm to come in and investigate how this happened, who is responsible, and more importantly, what do we need to do, both short-term and long-term, to make sure this issue does not happen again. It was important for me to bring an independent, objective third party. Given the fact that transparency is a big part of the way that I lead, I did not want an internal investigation that could be hampered by political pressures or people who've known one another for a long time. The independent investigation will be led by an attorney. His name is Attorney Eugene Pettis. Mr. Pettis is a past president of the Florida Bar and is highly qualified as having been recognized as the Lawyer of the Year for employment law by Best Lawyers in America, with extensive experience in representing and investigating for large school districts and governmental agencies. I authorized this outside investigation because as a new superintendent, as I've begun to look back over the last 10 plus years, it is clear that transportation in this district is not a new issue. I believe it is a management issue. It's a systems issue. The third-party investigation will evaluate the entire operation. Again, how this happened. It's a $50 million a year expenditure for this district. We will be investing approximately $50,000 for this investigation. It is 0.1% of the budget, and in my mind, worth every penny. I anticipate the investigation could run as short as 2 weeks and as long as 8 weeks. The results of the investigation will provide insights on actions we need to take, both short-term and long-term. Some of the issues are obvious. We need more drivers. We need more buses. And in my 20 years of experience in public education, our transportation compounds are some of the worst I have ever seen. They lack restrooms, adequate space for drivers that are air-conditioned or heated during the winter months. It is not fair, and we wonder why we cannot attract and retain top talent. I'm confident that some of the actions we need to take will require support from our elected officials. I look forward to continuing to work with our local and state representatives to find solutions that support our public schools and, most importantly, our children. With us today, I met with today, Barbara Watson, our union leader. She's been working very closely with me, and I appreciate her. And today I shared again my commitment to making sure that our drivers have the resources they need to do a great job. And let me reiterate this. Our drivers have stepped up. They've represented the district well. They've delivered the kids to the best of their ability. And now it's time for the district to step up and do what's right for them. At this time, I'd like to bring Mike Burke up to provide some additional information that his team has been addressing. Mr. Burke?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've accomplished to date and what parents and students can expect in the next few days. As Dr. Vosa mentioned, we've had an expanded team where we drafted members of our IT and finance departments to help us with this routing crisis, and they have been working nights and weekends to work through the large volume of routes and runs and bus stops to get this corrected. As of this morning, we have completed the major overhaul of our bus routes, and a good number of changes will be going into effect Tuesday morning when we start school next week. There is going to be some ongoing review over the course of the weekend that may require some more fine-tuning, and we'll be notifying schools individually of those changes. But the schools were told this afternoon to go ahead and print their routes and start sharing that information to improve transportation next week. We also are continuing to work towards addressing the bus driver shortage. We've hired over 20 new drivers since the start of the school, and we continue to recruit and train drivers each week. We have an ongoing training program, and we will continue that effort until all budgeted positions are filled. As a temporary measure, until we can fill all those bus driver vacancies, we are working with some local vendors to contract out a small number of our routes. This will help with some of the uncovered routes that have not been assigned to a driver, where drivers are having to double up to cover those, take some of the burden off our drivers until we can, hire more bus drivers to work alongside them. And this will also begin next week. Communication will be important this weekend. We will be doing another automated phone call to our parents, asking parents to go back to the website, the school district website, and to find my bus link and just check to see if there's any changes they need to be aware of before they send their kids to school Tuesday morning. As Dr. Vosa mentioned, longer term, we have a lot to work on as far as improving our facilities and making this a place where we attract and retain our bus drivers. I do want to mention on the equipment side, our board has been through the budget process, has included a large purchase of new school buses. Right now we're receiving about 5 new buses every 2 weeks. We are working with the vendor trying to see if we can do anything to expedite that. And another purchase is going to the board next Wednesday for an additional 96 buses. And we hope to get the majority of those buses by January. So between hiring new drivers and adding new buses, we expect to see continued improvement with our student transportation service.
Can you add something about the outsourced AC as well? AC vendors that are...
Yes. In working with our drivers and hearing from our parents, one of the concerns has been that a good number of our buses, the air conditioning is not functioning. And in these months, as hot as it is, that's a concern for both students and our drivers. Our mechanics have done their best to repair AC units, but we're working now to bring in outside vendors to help shore up that effort and see what we can do to get more and more of our buses air conditioned. And I also want to mention that the expanded routing team, this has been going on since the start of school. One thing we did this week that really paid great dividends was we dispatched the routers out to the area bus compounds to work directly with drivers. And getting the benefit of the driver's experience and having them sit side by side with the routing team worked very well. The drivers were appreciative to have that opportunity and see that we were really committed to getting this fixed. And the routers benefited greatly from their experience, and it's helped us kind of bundle up this next wave of route adjustments that will go into effect on Tuesday.
All right, so at this time, we'll go ahead and take a group sets of questions, and if anyone wants to do one-offs, we certainly can do that as well.
Superintendent, you said this will cost $50,000. Where's that money coming from?
It will cost up to $50,000. It may cost significantly less than that. I'll ask Mr. Burke to address the fund in which that will come from.
Yes, well, we're going to, we have reserves for some miscellaneous costs that may hit the district throughout the year. So barring no other source, it would come from that reserve. I will look within the transportation budget itself to see, we've mentioned we have a shortage of drivers. That translates to a budget surplus, with lapsed salaries, and I think it probably could more than cover the $50,000 just by looking at some of our vacant positions and utilizing some of the money that was budgeted for salaries for the start of the school year.
The district does hold a reserve for emergencies like this. We'll be bringing it. It's well within my authority to bring the board under an emergency circumstance and have them retroactively approve that sort of spend.
I was wondering if you could elaborate a little further on the vendors that are going to be used to supply either drivers or buses and the cost associated with that. And also, the district said in a statement released last night that your transportation problems are compounded by a lack of adequate state funding. Are you blaming this issue on state funding?
Well, I'll take the first part of that. Are we blaming the issue on state funding? My first level of accountability lies with our management. There are plenty of school districts within the state of Florida that are delivering their kids on time with the same sort of budget. So it's a cultural issue first. I think the transportation management has struggled to build a positive working climate for our workers. We're having a harder time finding people to work for $12 an hour, given that the economy is improving and there are other options for people. So I think we've probably fallen behind a little bit in that area. Have we had shortages of funding? Yes, we have had shortages of funding. In Georgia, my last district was given $9,200 per pupil. Here it's $7,200 per pupil. So that $2,000 per pupil difference makes a difference. Is it an excuse? It's not an excuse, because you can go right down to Miami-Dade or Orange County and see districts that are performing much better than we are. At the end of the day, we got to change how we do business in transportation. The climate is not the way it needs to be. I want people to feel proud about wearing their Palm Beach County logo.
On the outsourcing, we are finalizing the details of those contracts now, and I'll have to follow up with you on the details of the cost.
That'll be drivers and buses as well?
Correct. There's a couple companies that we've used in the past to some extent. We do have some private transport, and there's in some cases where we have a student that has a great deal of medical needs. We
Right.
have
And
a
that's
past
not
practice
new. We
of
have
contracting
done
out.
that before. And it is not a big market. Let me just tell you that. As the staff a couple of weeks ago began looking at what options exist, some of the buses don't meet requirements. So it's not like you can just call Greyhound and say, hey, bring me 100 drivers. It's not that simple. But I think, again, for somebody who's inventive and creative, they might have just found themselves a new niche.
How many buses are we talking about for drivers?
We've identified up to 25 routes that we could potentially outsource, and that's against a backdrop of 649 routes. And again, it's a relatively small subset, and this is a temporary measure. It's still our full intent to fill our bus driver vacancies and run those routes ourselves once we're fully staffed.
Superintendent, how many bus drivers would you say you still need?
It's my understanding that we have about 50 bus drivers that we still need. We've been hiring about 10 each week. Now, you have to remember, it takes time. They have to pass a physical. They have to take courses. They've got to do some training. Again, I think it's an opportunity for us to think differently about the way we budget. There are many districts in this country that start the year off with 50 or more bus drivers than they need. Why? Because each and every month you've got people who find other jobs, they go work for the private sector, they may move or leave, and we've not used that strategy. And so we need to really explore how we start our school year, how early we do our fairs, where we try to find employees.
What do you say to parents who are still dealing with this issue right now? We spoke with a parent who has a child who is autistic. The protocol calls for the driver to pull up in front of this facility, honk the horn, and someone comes out to meet that child. The bus driver opened the door, and the child got out and ran up the street and almost was hit by a car. What do you say to that parent that is very angry over what happened with this situation?
Well, you're going to have transportation issues every single day. We transport nearly 60,000 students every day. That issue that you're speaking of, or many other issues, are issues that are isolated that we need to work with people on, whether it's a training issue, et cetera. As they've come up through, parents making a complaint or a concern, then we address those single issues one at a time. But that's certainly where we stay focused, making sure that our kids are safe.
How, during the third week of school, are some of these buses still overcrowded? How and why is this still occurring?
I take that. Bus overcrowding in the first few weeks of schools is something this district has had to deal with in prior years. I think that was one of our issues last year. We weren't dealing with the routing crisis, but we did have to deal with overcrowded buses. And part of that's not uncommon is we have to continue to react to it. The students may not all jump on the bus the first week, but as the school year progresses, we find more and more kids taking advantage of the bus service. So we have to really manage those on a case-by-case basis, and in many cases it requires just splitting the route and readjusting our routes and adding a second bus or just reconfiguring the route so that we can balance that load. We also have buses that are running under capacity. And as the school year goes on, we kind of balance that out. This year, unfortunately, because of the rough start we had with the routing system, we're ironing out issues in the third and fourth week of school that normally we would have addressed in the first and second week. So we do appreciate the parents' patience as we kind of, we're struggling through this a little bit this year, admittedly with the routing crisis, but as things get back to normal here and we stabilize, we'll be able to refine and make those adjustments.
All right. I'll just, for either one of you, just maybe repeating what exactly you hope this outside attorney can figure out as he, why is it important to bring this guy in to continue to look at this problem?
It is important that transparency to the community exists, and I think bringing in a third-party objective individual who can ensure that they look very carefully at what happened, why it happened, and who's responsible. At the end of the day, accountability is going to be part of the next step. After that, we'll begin thinking about ways to improve outcomes for on-time delivery, et cetera. The idea that buses are overcrowded, I think, is also an issue of the way we have kids sign up for buses. There are some things that I've seen now that we've gotten into the weeds with this situation that can clearly be improved with using some of the technology that we already have and think about things a little bit differently.
Sort of just piggybacking off that question, so is this an attorney? Does he have a background in transportation issues?
So this individual does have a background in investigations similar to this. The fact that he's a transportation expert or not is not the case. What I need to know is who did what, who's responsible, what kind of communication was going back and forth, when were decisions made. I need a timeline. I need to have an objective third party really take a look at the way we've been doing business in transportation, and more importantly, about this particular case. How we fix those issues is going to be separate. This gentleman is just going to be lifting up some of the concerns, the broader topics, and then we'll move more deeply into how we fix it. How you fix it is really going to be our responsibility.
I think the question that's on most parents' minds at this point is, when will this be fixed?
Right.
Do you have a definitive date or time as to when this will be repaired?
Right now, we are at the same place we were last year, which, again, is unacceptable. The idea that I sat with several managers this past week, and they were sort of breathing a sigh of relief, saying that we've met the threshold. And I said, well, that's great, but most districts are at 95% right now. That's not good. So I don't think we'll ever be at 100%. It never is. It's always 98, 99%. But we're not there. We're not pleased yet until we do that. Once we get all of our bus drivers' positions filled, we'll have a much better sense of the amount of time that it takes, if we have to tweak some other routes. But we don't have a definitive answer right now. We don't. We're just going to keep plugging away at it and making progress where we need to. I wish I could tell you it'll be fixed by next week. It's never been fixed. It hasn't been fixed for 10 years. So we're going to keep pushing through this. I need to have people who show up to work, who do a great job, that the conditions that they come to work in are positive, and that we retain and pay our people well so that they stay with us. All right, thank you very much for being here, and we'll take any other individual questions as needed. Thank you.